I always thought I had it all figured out, that I was in control of my life, my decisions, everything. I was confident, a little too confident maybe, and I had a plan. Everything was going according to that plan. I was going to impress the right people, make the right connections, and climb the social ladder. And tonight was supposed to be my night, the night I'd meet him, the billionaire, the man who could change everything for me, for my family. But little did I know, the night would unfold in a way I never could have imagined, and all my plans would fall apart. My name is Jenny, and I'm used to getting what I want. I was raised in a family where image was everything, where wealth and status determined your worth. My dad, a self-proclaimed business mogul, always told me that money was the key to success. So I learned early on to play the game. Charm, beauty, and confidence, those were my weapons. And tonight, I was armed and ready. The night started like any other. I walked into the beauty salon with my usual air of superiority, expecting to be treated like royalty. But things didn't go as planned. As soon as I stepped in, I could feel the eyes of the other customers on me. I was already running late, and the last thing I needed was to wait in line. But the line was long and the staff was busy. So when I saw an opening, I decided to take matters into my own hands. "Don't wave your broke fingers at me," I snapped at the woman who had the audacity to tell me to wait my turn. "I'm not a poor. I need you to go to the back of the line and wait your turn like everybody else." She just stared at me, probably surprised by my tone. I didn't care. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to look perfect, to get in and out. I couldn't afford any more delays. My dad was depending on me tonight. He had promised me that if I impressed the right guy, my future would be set. The pressure was immense, but I didn't show it, at least not on the outside. But then, the woman at the counter wasn't having it. She didn't back down, not like I expected her to. "Ma'am, these people have been waiting longer than you. It's only fair that you wait your turn." "You don't understand," I muttered, my patience running thin. "I have an important meeting. I can't afford to be late." The staff exchanged glances, and one of the other customers scoffed. "Maybe you should have planned ahead," she muttered under her breath. I felt my face flush with anger. "This world doesn't revolve around you," the woman at the counter said, her voice firm. "Please wait your turn." I gritted my teeth. How dare they? How dare they treat me like one of them? I was better than this. I was meant for something bigger, something more. I threw my head back, giving her a scornful look. "You know what? Forget it. I'll find another place to go." And with that, I stormed out. I didn't have time to waste. Tonight, I had to shine. I had to make sure everything was perfect. My dad's business was falling apart, and I was the only one who could save us. It wasn't fair. He should have never gotten himself into this mess. But that wasn't important right now. What mattered was making sure I nailed this tonight. I rushed home, ignoring the voices in my head that questioned my choices. When I arrived, my dad was already there, pacing nervously. "Jenny, you're here. Good. Come on. We have to get you ready." "Dad, relax. I've got this." I was trying to sound confident, but the weight of everything pressing on my shoulders was becoming too much. He didn't need to know that, though. "You have to understand, this guy is important, really important," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "He's going to be a billionaire before he's 35. His family is loaded. If you win him over, we won't have to worry about anything ever again." "I get it, Dad, but this whole thing feels wrong," I admitted, the doubt creeping in. "I don't want to just marry a guy because he's rich. I want someone who gets me." My dad's eyes hardened. "You don't have a choice, Jenny. If you want to save this family, if you want to live the life you've always wanted, you need to make this happen." His words cut deep, but I couldn't show it. Not now. I had to stay focused. I had to look perfect. I had to make him proud, even if it meant sacrificing myself in the process. We argued for a while about the details, but in the end, I agreed to go along with his plan. I went upstairs to change, the list he had prepared for me in hand. Everything was meticulously planned, the color of the dress, the type of food, even the music. I had to do everything right. There was no room for error. As I dressed, I tried to shake off the uncomfortable feeling gnawing at me. I told myself it was just nerves. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The knock at the door was like a jolt of electricity through me. He was here. I opened the door to see a man in a sleek suit, looking every bit the part of the millionaire my dad had promised he was. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Hi," he said, his voice calm and collected. "I'm Jason. Nice to meet you." I couldn't hide my surprise. He didn't look like what I expected at all. He wasn't flashy, wasn't wearing designer clothes. He looked normal, too normal. And then I realized that the night was going to be nothing like I imagined. I tried to play it cool even though my mind was racing. This was not how I imagined things would go. He didn't look rich, didn't act like the kind of man my dad had described. But I wasn't about to back out now. I had worked too hard to get this far. "So, Jason," I said, my voice a little shaky, but I forced a smile. "Welcome. I'm so glad you could make it tonight." He smiled politely, but there was a certain calmness about him that threw me off. He wasn't as eager to impress me as I had expected. Why wasn't he falling for my charm? "Thanks for having me," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "It looks like you've put a lot of effort into this evening." My dad appeared behind me, beaming like he had just won the lottery. "Jason, it's so good to finally meet you," he said, extending his hand. "This is my daughter, Jenny. I know she's going to make a great impression on you tonight." Jason shook my dad's hand, but his eyes never met mine. There was something about his demeanor that made me feel like I was the one being judged. Did he not see how hard I had worked? "Thanks for having me," he repeated, looking a bit uncomfortable. "I'm sure tonight will be interesting." Interesting? What did that even mean? I smiled tightly, trying to regain control of the situation. I was used to being in charge, used to being the one who called the shots. This wasn't supposed to be a challenge. I had a plan, but my mind kept wandering back to the strange feeling in my gut. I couldn't shake it. The evening started off awkwardly. As we sat down for dinner, my dad kept talking about business, trying to make the conversation flow while I desperately tried to keep Jason engaged. But it was like talking to a wall. He didn't seem impressed by my attempts at small talk. He barely reacted to my stories about my recent travels or how I had almost made a big deal in the fashion industry. The tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't just my nerves, it was the distance between Jason and me. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. What was I missing? Then, just as I was about to bring up the topic of his family's wealth, Jason spoke. "I'm sorry, Jenny, but I have to ask," he said, suddenly serious. "Are you really interested in me, or is this just part of the plan?" I froze. The question hit me like a ton of bricks. My mind went blank for a moment as I tried to process what he had just said. Was he on to me? Did he know everything? "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice faltering despite my best efforts to sound calm. He leaned back in his chair, looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "Don't get me wrong, you're beautiful and I'm sure you're an interesting person. But there's something about this whole situation that doesn't feel right. I mean, I'm here and it's clear that you've been set up for this date. Am I wrong?" My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't going how I planned. Not at all. I glanced at my dad, who was sitting across from me, his face suddenly flushed with panic. He didn't expect Jason to catch on so quickly. He wasn't supposed to question me. Not like this. "It's not like that," I said quickly, my voice rising. "I mean, yes, my dad wanted me to meet you, but Jason cut me off, his tone surprisingly calm. "I'm not angry, Jenny. I'm just curious. Are you really interested in getting to know me, or are you just playing a game?" There it was again, the feeling that I was losing control. I never lost control. I was always the one in charge. But here I was, struggling to keep up with a man who didn't seem impressed by anything I did. It was infuriating. I began, but my words caught in my throat. What could I say? The truth? That I was here because my dad had pushed me to make this work? That I was trying to secure a future for my family? I wasn't sure he would even understand. "Look," Jason said, his voice softening, "I don't need you to lie to me. I can tell when someone's being honest. And I get it. I know how this world works. People use each other to get ahead, but I'm not interested in that." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I tried to hide it, tried to maintain my composure, but inside something snapped. For the first time in a long time, I felt exposed, vulnerable. How had I ended up here? "I don't know what you want from me," I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just trying to do what's best for my family. I'm under a lot of pressure. You have no idea what it's like." He looked at me, his gaze softer now, but still distant. I get it, but I don't think you're going to find what you're looking for by pretending to be something you're not. Those words hit me harder than I could have imagined. I had spent so long building up this facade, this image of who I was supposed to be, that I had completely forgotten who I really was. What was I really looking for? I didn't even know anymore. Maybe you're right, I whispered, more to myself than to him. Maybe I've been pretending too long. Jason didn't say anything more. He simply stood up, as if to signal that the night was over. I watched him walk out, leaving me sitting there, my world crashing down around me. What had I done? My dad was still sitting there, his face a mask of anger and disappointment. You blew it, Jenny, he muttered under his breath. You had a chance, and you ruined it. I couldn't respond. I couldn't find the words. All I could do was sit there, staring at the empty chair where Jason had been just moments before. My life, my plan, everything had just fallen apart, and it was all my fault. A few days passed since that disastrous evening. I tried to forget about Jason, to focus on the life my dad had planned for me, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. I kept replaying our conversation in my mind, wondering if maybe I had misunderstood him. Had he been trying to help me? Or was he just another guy who didn't take me seriously? The truth was I couldn't stop thinking about him. There was something about Jason that I couldn't get out of my head. His calm demeanor, the way he saw through my act. He had a way of making me feel real, like I wasn't just some image I had crafted for everyone to see. It was strange, unsettling, but in a way it was also comforting. And so, despite my attempts to push him out of my mind, I found myself hoping for another chance to see him. It happened about a week later in the most unexpected way. I was out with some friends celebrating a small victory in my life. I had just landed a deal that could have been the start of something big. We were at a local cafe, and I was trying to forget about all the pressures that had been weighing on me. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary when I walked in, but then I saw him. Jason. He was sitting at a corner table, working on his laptop, oblivious to the world around him. For a second, I froze. Was this really happening? I had just been thinking about him, and now here he was in front of me, in a place I least expected. My heart raced. I knew I should just leave him alone, pretend I hadn't seen him. But something inside me urged me to take action. I walked over to his table, my pulse quickening with every step. Jason, I said, my voice a little shaky. He looked up, surprised but not unfazed. His expression softened when he recognized me. Jenny, what a surprise. I tried to smile, but I felt awkward. I wasn't used to this, approaching someone like this, especially after how things had ended last time. But there was something about him that made me want to try, to see if I could make things right. What are you doing here? I asked, taking a seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. I wasn't sure why I felt so bold. Maybe it was the excitement from earlier in the day, or maybe it was just the pull of his presence. Just working, he said, his eyes glancing back at his laptop. I like to get out of the office sometimes. It's quieter here. I nodded, trying to ignore the discomfort that still lingered between us. I've been thinking about what you said, I admitted, feeling vulnerable, about not pretending to be someone I'm not. He raised an eyebrow, obviously intrigued. And what did you come up with? I don't know, I said, feeling self-conscious now. I think maybe you were right. I've been so focused on impressing everyone, but in the process, I've lost sight of who I really am. I've been chasing after things that don't even matter. He stared at me for a long moment, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was seeing me for who I really was. I'm glad to hear that, he said finally, his tone softer than before. I think it's easy to get lost in the chase. But at the end of the day, what really matters is being true to yourself. I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Maybe there was hope for me after all. Thanks, Jason, I needed to hear that. He smiled, but there was a hint of something else in his eyes. Was that interest? I couldn't be sure. I had no idea where this conversation was going, but I liked the way it made me feel. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Just as the conversation was starting to flow, my phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the moment. It was a text from my dad, reminding me about an upcoming meeting. I cursed under my breath, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on me once again. Sorry, I've got to go. My dad is on my case again. No problem, Jason said with a shrug. It was nice running into you, Jenny. Yeah, you too, I said, standing up and grabbing my bag. I hesitated for a moment, then looked at him one last time. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime when you're free? He looked up at me, and for the briefest moment, there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe. Yeah, sure, that sounds nice. As I left the cafe, I couldn't help but smile. This wasn't how I imagined our next meeting would go, but somehow it felt right. Maybe things were starting to change after all. Maybe I wasn't so lost anymore. Eto. The next time I saw Jason, it was entirely by accident again. I was at a charity event with my dad, trying to impress some important people, but my thoughts kept wandering to him. And there he was, across the room, standing by the refreshments table. Our eyes met, and for a moment the chaos around us seemed to fade away. I wasn't sure if he had seen me as just another person at the event, or if he was actually recognizing me for who I was. But when I walked over to him, his smile was warm, genuine. It was like we had our own little bubble in the middle of a crowded room. Fancy seeing you here, he said, his voice low, but with a hint of amusement. Yeah, well, my dad insisted on me coming, I replied, trying to sound casual. I didn't expect to run into you. Small world, he said. How's everything going with your business? I winced at the word business. It was always a reminder of the life I was living, a life that wasn't entirely mine. But Jason wasn't judgmental. He was just there, listening. It's a lot, I admitted, my voice softer than usual. But I'm getting through it. Thanks for asking. He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. I'm glad you're doing okay. Then after a beat, he added, you know, if you ever need to talk about things, I'm here. That was the moment I realized Jason wasn't like anyone else I had ever met. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't trying to use me for something. He was just being himself. And for the first time in a long time, I wanted to know more about him. As we talked, something shifted between us. The connection was undeniable. We weren't just two people who had met by chance anymore. We were two people who were starting to understand each other. And for the first time, I was truly interested in him, not because of who he was, but because of who I felt I could be when I was with him. I couldn't deny it any longer. There was something about Jason that had completely captured my attention. Maybe it was his calmness, his unshakable confidence in just being himself. Or maybe it was the way he made me feel like I didn't need to be anything other than who I truly was. That night at the charity event, when he offered me a simple but genuine gesture of kindness, I felt an unexpected connection, one that went deeper than any shallow pursuit of wealth or status. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other by chance. I tried not to read too much into it, but each time I found myself drawn to him more. Our conversations started to feel less like small talk and more like real exchanges between two people who were genuinely getting to know each other. There was a vulnerability in him that I hadn't seen before, and it made me want to peel back the layers of his life, just as he had begun to peel back mine. One afternoon, I was sitting at a cafe near my office trying to get some work done when the door opened and Jason walked in. His eyes immediately found mine, and he smiled as if he were seeing an old friend, not someone he had met only a few times before. Fancy seeing you here again, he said, his voice warm but with a hint of playfulness. Yeah, I laughed, feeling a bit flustered. I swear we keep bumping into each other. Is this fate or just coincidence? He pulled up a chair and sat across from me without asking, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe it's fate, or maybe we're just two people who need some space from the world to be ourselves. His words struck me in a way I hadn't expected. I'd spent so much of my life trying to please everyone else, trying to fit into the mold of what people expected me to be. And yet here was Jason saying something that made me question everything I had thought I knew about myself. So tell me, Jenny, he said, leaning back in his chair, what's really going on with you? I can tell you're not just this glamorous businesswoman everyone sees. What do you really want? The question hit me harder than I expected. I had always been so focused on keeping up appearances, on living up to my dad's expectations, that I hadn't even taken a moment to think about what I wanted. Deep down, I knew the answer. I wanted to be free, free from the pressure, from the constant need to impress, from the expectations that had shaped my life. But saying it out loud was another thing entirely. I hesitated, unsure how to put my thoughts into words. I don't know. I've spent so much time trying to be someone I'm not, trying to live up to what everyone expects of me. But I'm starting to realize that maybe that's not enough. He nodded, his expression softening. It's easy to get lost in what others want for you, but the real question is, what do you want for yourself? The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. What did I want for myself? I was so used to the pressure, to the idea that my value was tied to my ability to make the right connections and impress the right people. But sitting here with Jason, I realized how empty that all felt. I wanted something more than wealth, more than status, more than approval. I guess I want to be happy, I admitted, the words coming out before I could stop them. I want to stop pretending, stop living for everyone else. I want to live for me. Jason smiled, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes, understanding, maybe even admiration. You're getting there, Jenny. You're starting to figure it out. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to be someone else. I wasn't pretending for anyone. I was just being me. As we continued to talk, I felt myself opening up in ways I hadn't expected. Jason wasn't just someone I had met by chance anymore. He had become someone I genuinely wanted to know, someone who made me feel comfortable in my own skin. Before I knew it, hours had passed and the cafe was closing down for the night. We stood up, and I realized how easy it had been to be around him. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people connecting. I had a great time, I said, my voice soft but sincere. I really did. Me too, he replied with a smile. We should do this again sometime. Definitely, I said. I said, feeling a flutter in my chest. I'd like that. As we said our goodbyes and walked in opposite directions, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement building inside me. Maybe this wasn't just a random encounter after all. Maybe this was the beginning of something real, something that had nothing to do with appearances or wealth. Maybe this was the start of something that could change both of our lives. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Jason and I continued to see each other, often by chance, but each time it felt like we were getting closer. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, to the way he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. One evening, as we sat at a park watching the sunset, Jason turned to me and said something that would change everything. Jenny, he said, his voice quiet but firm, I've been thinking about you a lot lately, and I think there's something real between us. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just some casual fling, not for him. And it wasn't for me either. I feel the same way, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He smiled, a genuine smile, and I felt a warmth spread through me. Maybe this was where I was meant to be all along, not chasing after empty dreams or living for someone else's approval. Maybe the life I was meant to live was one where I could just be myself, surrounded by people who cared for me for who I truly was. As the days passed, Jason and I grew closer. The connection between us deepened, and for the first time I realized that the most important thing wasn't what we had in our bank accounts or how impressive we were to the world. It was how we made each other feel. And with Jason, I felt like I could finally breathe, like I could finally be the person I had always wanted to be. The chase for wealth and status no longer seemed so important. What mattered now was the simple joy of being with someone who saw me for who I really was, someone who made me feel at home in my own skin. For the first time, I was living life on my own terms. As time passed, Jason and I grew even closer. What had started as an unexpected encounter turned into something real, something that neither of us had anticipated. With each meeting, I learned more about him, his values, his dreams, and what truly mattered in life. I wasn't just another woman he met at a party or an event. I was someone who had captured his heart, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen for who I really was. We spent our days exploring new places together, having long conversations about everything and nothing, laughing about silly things, and opening up to each other in ways I never thought possible. Jason had shown me that life wasn't about status, wealth, or impressing others. It was about being true to yourself and finding someone who accepted you for who you really were. One evening, as we sat together on the balcony of his apartment watching the sunset, Jason turned to me with a smile that spoke volumes. Jenny, he said softly, I never thought I'd find someone like you. You're not just beautiful on the outside. You're real, and I love that about you. I love how you've grown and how you've learned to be yourself. My heart swelled with emotion. I never thought I'd find someone like you either, I admitted, my voice filled with sincerity. I've spent so much time pretending, trying to be someone I'm not. But with you, I don't have to pretend. You've shown me that being real is enough. He reached for my hand, his touch warm and comforting. You are enough, Jenny. You always have been. Tears welled up in my eyes, but this time, they were tears of gratitude and happiness. I had found someone who loved me for me, not for the image I had tried so hard to create. And in turn, I had learned to love myself again, to embrace who I truly was. A few months later, we made the decision to move in together, starting a new chapter in our lives. My dad, despite his initial reservations about Jason and the unconventional path I had chosen, eventually came to see how happy I was. He understood in his own way that the wealth and power he had always chased weren't the things that brought fulfillment. Love and authenticity, he realized, were what truly mattered. As Jason and I stood together looking out at the life we had built, I knew that the journey to this point had been worth every challenge, every mistake, and every lesson learned along the way. We had found something that couldn't be bought with money or status, a deep, meaningful connection built on trust, respect, and love. Our story was just beginning, but one thing was clear. We had both found our happily ever after. What do you think about Jenny's journey? Did she make the right choice by following her heart instead of pursuing wealth and status? How do you feel about the way she treated Jason at the beginning? And what can we learn from her transformation? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it.